It is September 18th, 2022. The weather is cool as the clouds hang low in the foothills. Yesterday's rains had blessedly knocked the lingering summer smoke from the sky, making the surrounding Oregon outback appear sharp and dreamlike. Next to me, in the passenger seat, was Rachel, my ride or die, who I had spent the last decade and 200,000 miles with, and in the back were our kids, two blue heelers, always ready for fun. Carrying us all was my 1978 Volkswagen bus Sweet Pea, the crusty old chariot that had been our home for all our pursuits and life lessons was steadily rolling us into our next grand adventure, married life. 15 years now, and that whole time the medium through which I had my experience was this old Volkswagen bus. As we putt-putted through the countryside, I reflected on our past, the lessons learned, and how fortunate I am. 15 years ago, I was just a kid from Yuma, Colorado, a dusty oasis in the middle of nowhere, the world's third largest feedlot, 3 stoplights, 2 intersecting highways, corn, soy, sugar beets, and wheat fields as far as the eye could see. I was raised by my mother with my 3 other siblings, not interacting with my father, bouncing from house to house, then later from state to state, and rocky relationship to the next, never really knowing home as a single solitary place or structure. Until Yuma. In 2009, I was a 19-year-old who had spent the last 10 years of his life in the flattest part of the state, better known for its mountains. I left Yuma to see who I was in the world, and find myself in what was surely a bigger picture. I found myself drawn to Seattle, Washington at this time. There in the Emerald City, I had a chance to make a home with my biological father, who I had barely spoken to in 11 years, while starting community college at the same time, only to fail at both 6 months in. I was lucky enough to land in a small, dank attic turned bedroom, living with my fellow pizza cooks. Life was pretty bleak. I flailed around for a year before I found friends who inspired me to adventure and explore life. A lot of it was climbing, a new hobby that I was obsessed with, that changed my body drastically. I used my hard-earned money to pay for school out of pocket. Now I was a broke, carless line cook living on leftover pizza and Rainier beer.
You come up onto the alley cat and you're looking around at everybody, and I think you'd just come to Fort Collins, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you were like fresh.
Yeah.
And
Days ago.
me and Preston were sitting back there just smoking and drinking coffee, and you came up, hey, you guys cool? And we just started laughing. And like, yeah, man, we're cool. You want to hang out? And that was the beginning.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
That's when I got a call that would affect my life in unforeseen ways even unto this day. My father's sister is an eccentric woman who I only remember from very few childhood moments, but I could tell she was always watching out for me. She told me she had an offer for my father or me, a 1978 Volkswagen bus that had been her work truck for the last 15 years. She was tired of driving it in the city and wanted a new work truck to be the face of her landscaping business. So whoever got to Denver first got the bus for free. I had barely driven a manual vehicle at this point in my life, but surely would be a fool to pass on the opportunity for a free vehicle, and an old Volkswagen bus at that. I spent every penny I had squirreled away to fly to Denver and meet it, with maybe just enough to get back. My aunt introduced me to Sweet Pea on an early spring morning in Cherry Creek, Colorado. One of those crisp spring Colorado mornings where the cold of not quite frost could be felt holding back, bursting life waiting on the warmth of afternoon. Sweet Pea was a rusty, jovial brick on wheels. She was a faded split pea soup green color, peppered with large gray Bondo all over. The whole rust bucket package was covered in potting soil and various leftover landscaping scraps. I was enamored, ecstatic, and after a couple of days of being trained in the ways of hectic, slow, old vehicle, fast city manual shifting, I was released on my journey back to the sleepy, dark city streets of Seattle. Little did I know at the time that the streets are exactly what I would be returning to after my first short but enthralling adventure, camping and climbing rocks for 4 days along the road back. The bad news of not being allowed to renew my lease hit me like the torrential, late winter rains that hammered the roof of the house that evening. I only had my coworker Noah as a friend and social network in Seattle, and he was just as broke, Just as foreign in that northern land as I was, being from Southern California, my options were limited, and time was incredibly short. Slowly, an idea came to mind that seemed so simple, it was stupid. I had just spent almost a week sleeping in Sweet Pea while driving her back. Why not just sleep in her for a while until I found a place? I began to experience a type of emotional renaissance at this time, where I felt safe. Safe enough for the first time to open myself up and chase my dreams. I was at the time obsessed with climbing rocks, and they could be found the world over, and I now had the safety of home wherever I could park it. The first step of this journey began with saying goodbye, for now, to Noah, and the beautifully woeful skyline of the Puget Sound in early spring, when the continuous rains began to let up, little by little.
I remember helping you out with, trying to scrape some of the mold out of, the pop top for the Westphalia, camper top, the one that did, the diagonal vertical.
Yeah.
With the furniture unit, you had all of these nooks and crannies for all your different stuff. The bus, was more cramped, but it was also, more like a tiny house than it is in the current configuration. Knowing where the next bit of money is coming from, your traveling style embraces uncertainty in a way that is very brave and very cool, and you're very talented at it. But it would have driven me crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's such a beautiful and cool and romantic idea to hit the road and just keep going, and it's amazing how many different eras of your life where you've been able to do that and really get some miles in.
My first stint of adventure found me spending 8 months traveling along the coast, finding rocks to climb from Seattle to Los Angeles. I learned to view my situation differently when the reality of homelessness in San Francisco was how I lived for over a month. When I visited Hayden-Ashbury for the historical gravity of the location, I met a local in the punk scene who heard my parking plight and offered to show me where I could park for free for as long as I was visiting. Hilarity House was a punk squat house in Berkeley, California, whose proprietors advocated for a lifestyle free of government rule while providing a system of support open for all and maintained by all. I spent the next month engrossing myself actively in the house and climbing at all spots in the Bay Area. While staying in this house for homeless travelers, I met people and ideas from all over the world. This was how I was introduced to one of the most influential social constructs of my life. One evening we emptied Sweet Pea of all of my belongings and refilled her floor to ceiling with food dove from a list of all the grocery store dumpsters without any locks in the Bay Area. The next morning, the food was distributed among 4 squat houses in the area that all represented safe spaces for travelers of various beliefs. That afternoon, I was serving soup outside of a warming shelter that I had made from society's unwanted vegetables and herbs. I had known that our political and economic systems are faulty and let humans fall through the cracks of its inadequateness. What I had not seen was the people who thrive off of a system that gives them little credence. A situation that seems ever dark can in fact create the most piercing light in the form of kindness of others. A few years of self-discovery, rock hunting, and friend visiting around the western half of the United States, I found myself at the age of 22 to be a little lonely. I had adopted Abby, my 4-year-old rescued healer, but she wasn't much one for conversation, unless that conversing was fetch. That summer, I returned to Colorado to be near friends, family, and familiar rocks while living and working in a legendary local music venue 20 miles into the Poudre Canyon. Every night was a booze and weed suffused party with beautiful humans under the boundless Colorado sky. Every day, a quest to find the next boulder to befriend, or river spot to lap lazily around. Abby and I were free and wild, yet I felt strangely hollow inside, despite the sunshine that was over me no matter what I did. My older brother was living very close to me that summer while working on Colorado's largest organic vegetable farm. He reveled in the type of hard labor we grew up doing, and for him it facilitated traveling while working for room and board as well as food. I explained my feelings of lacking to him and was soon convinced to come and spend a day with him working on the farm to see if maybe that's what I was looking for. I met my forever co-pilot the next day, after the daily work was done and all 30 interns were turned loose. She introduced herself as Rachel and set me hurriedly to cutting up tomatoes for a canning project she was heading. I was smitten with her beauty right off the hitch, and soon came to respect her intelligence and work ethic. She wasn't afraid of anything, and tried everything. Her laugh was contagious, and her demeanor easy to be around. We became fast friends, spending evenings in Sweet Pea, sharing life stories, and playing with Abby. A few months later, our friendship turned into summer love as we watched winter fast approaching. The farming season was over, and she left with everyone else. My brother and I had been offered permanent jobs and housing through our hard work, but I wouldn't let her go. I believe that we come into this world alone and leave it just the same, and that what we do in between is what really matters. Losing her made me realize that who we spend that time with matters most of all. So I gave chase, and somehow convinced her to be my first mate as we conquered the asphalt ocean in a rusty artifact from a bygone era. The succeeding 10 years would be a campaign of self-learning as we explored our passions for horticulture and animal husbandry, exploring and fostering friendships and family relationships, inviting changes together while our love grew. We celebrated reunions with loved ones and the welcoming of new life, all with the aid and presence of Sweet Pea.
I mean, I had never met anything like Sweet Pea. Like, I had been living in New York City and was living like a very, just like city life. And I had never like been inside a vintage Volkswagen bus. And I thought she was quite charming. Adventure. It was definitely harder than I thought it was going to be and less charming.
He made me pee in a can.
Yeah, I mean, we had systems. It was not quite as glamorous as, all the influencers make it look like it is. And we tried to do that. I had a blog and stuff. And it was quite magical. I do remember, I think I'm somebody that does crave, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or just like my personality, but I do like a nest. And since I moved away from home when I was 18, which was 14 years ago now, I have never lived in one place for more than maybe 2 years. One house.
Yeah.
But Sweet Pea has been my home for a decade.
Yeah.
And she's always felt safe, which is kind of funny considering what you were just saying. She breaks down all the time. It's
we've had mice in here.
We've had mice in here. We've had when you're flying down the highway, there's nothing but a super thin piece of metal between you and death. There's no airbags. The seatbelts are kind of sketchy, but I've never felt more safe in a place than I do in Sweet Pea.
Yeah.
She's my home.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love most about Sweet Pea is that it is a little refuge wherever we go, and it's a symbol of comfort and a symbol of safety in a way.
Here we were now, still in Sweet Pea, hugging the side of some of our favorite picturesque foothills as we chugged on a back highway out to one of our favorite desert hot springs. This time, and only this time, we are followed by all of our friends and family we have made along the road of life. They come to watch us unify our love and all the beliefs that we found and hold dear up to this point in our journey. With Sweet Pea as our witness and 90 friends and family from all over the continental U.S., we were about to celebrate in the desert under the expanse of the Oregon sky for 3 days. At the age of 33, and on my way to my wedding, I can say I believe there could never be a darkness without a light, that it is worth choosing well who you get to spend your limited time here with, and that home is where you park it. Sweet Pea has been and will continue to be a symbol of the safety of home and the spirit of adventure that allows my family and I to radically enhance our worldviews through the practical application of adventure.
One of my favorite memories of being in both of our buses and traveling together in Colorado is that Turkey Creek Road camp spot that we found.
Yeah.
The Forest Service Road, when it's up by Uray kind of after we went to the hot springs out there.
Huh.
And we just strung up lights and played really loud music and had a fire and just had like a little like rave out in the middle of nowhere. And I just remember like walking out into the woods with Rachel and like looking back on the campsite and just seeing light glowing from the 2 buses and just having that be like the cozy sensation, like nothing else around.
Yeah.
But like this little dual nest situation in the middle of nowhere. So much fun.
All the fun weekend trips.
Two very prominent memories of Sweet Pea that I have that I kind of treasure. One of which was early on, sort of right before you were thinking about leaving town, and Sweet Pea was parked outside of Kyle DeCory's house. It was on like an angle, and your clutch cable, I believe, snapped. And just the level of absolute apoplectic rage that you had was really, really wild. And like having, had a bus, I've been there, I felt that, like I have had total sympathy and empathy for that moment. But that was the first time that I had like been close to like bus anger, like bus inspired anger. And like it was quite a thing. And like you were in such a precarious position too, because like that was like an outrageous like angle of street.
Dude, I know, that's what it stressed me out so much.
Yeah, with good reason. Like the whole situation was just fucked. But like you handled it, and then you drove several thousand more miles, and then it was
that's how I learned how to change my clutch cable out.
Right, like that's the thing about it, is that they're not always like necessarily 100% positive adventures, but they are always adventures for sure. And then like one of my favorite scenic memories is when we were traveling in Colorado together, and we went out to that reservoir that was I think headwaters of the Colorado River up
when we have like a really good picture of 2 buses together at.
Yeah, but like just that winding road is my favorite kind of road to drive. Just like slow, scenic, 1-lane dirt road, and it was just so perfectly Colorado with like the depth of blue of the reservoir on one side and the high granite cliffs on the other, and then like watching you go ahead in Sweet Pea and like seeing sort of the faded olive of Sweet Pea blend in with all of the trees, and like Sweet Pea's like earth tones and like slightly worn quality, like honestly like make it look so perfectly at home in nature. Like it just looks beautiful when it's driving along on roads like that. It's always fun to drive behind you.
Because it's not all that like straightforward. It's actually kind of difficult, like even for somebody that's used to driving manual transmission. Like the gears float around and you just have to be really on it to drive this bus. So I'll never forget the first trip where I was allowed to drive her. Like I had been practicing and I was feeling confident, and Mitty felt confident enough to let me drive her. And so I was driving her with my best friend Kendra in the passenger seat, and Mitty and our friend Noah were in a different bus in front of us. And there was construction on a super steep mountain pass, like grades. And like the hardest thing about driving Sweet Pea is getting her going if you're on a steep incline, like trying to go uphill. And so we got stopped like with a flagger in a construction zone on a steep mountain pass, and we're at a complete stop, and we're like headed down the mountain. I looked at Kendra and I said, okay, hey, listen, when we start moving, we're gonna go backwards, and I'm gonna try my hardest to make it be not very far that we go backwards, but we gonna move backwards a little bit. So I need you to be like mentally prepared for that, and just like don't freak out, because like obviously I'm freaking out. And she was like, yeah, cool, totally, got it, no problem. And then we got like the sign flipped around, it was time to start moving, and I started going, and we moved backwards like more than I wanted to before I could catch it in first gear, and Kendra just started screaming. Like she just was like, Rachel! Rachel! And then I started screaming, and I was yelling words that I probably shouldn't say on this video, but like we were screaming at each other. And I caught first gear, and we were headed up the mountain, but it was like several minutes of us just screaming at each other, like trying to get calmed down after that. But I also feel like that was like a test of like my driving skills, but also like my mental fortitude, and I passed.
Yeah.